Jurassic World Alive has brought some of the fiercest beasts in prehistoric and cinematic history to life. But what happens when the tyrants of the meta clash head to head? These battles often happen in the game, but few take the time to break them down and to truly understand what makes these monsters so dominant. To uncover who truly rules the arena, to see what makes these titans tick and appreciate their skills, I'll be staging my own battles. Comparing their strengths, weaknesses, and the impact they have on the battlefield. With expert insight and detailed breakdowns, we bring these titans to life and test their might. Woo! Finally, at the end of the video, our combatants will come face to face in the ultimate showdown. 2 top-tier contenders, 1 winner on Jurassic Face Off. The Masto is the unstoppable wall of the wetlands, a living fortress. Its opponent, the Ampelo, is a sheer tank, a tower of absolute power. They're both armed to the teeth, with abilities that up their punch, giant jaws, and a hunger for victory. These guys have proven they can take down common threats, but what happens when they try to take each other down? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what you're about to find out today on the first ever episode of Jurassic Face Off. Just to clarify something, I just want to point out that while this face-off is about finding out who is gonna win, it's not particularly about who would win in a straight-up fight to the death. However, more so, this is more of a fight to figure out which creature is better overall in the arena, and for you, should you decide to invest in it. So, before we jump into the actual face-off itself, and in case you folks are not familiar with the combatants for whatever reason, let me introduce you to them very briefly. Contender number 1. The Masto. Meet the Triassic Juggernaut, an omega from the swamps and a modern menace of the meta. Thick-skinned, battle-hardened, and built like a fortress. Standing as one of the most durable creatures in the game, this super tank specializes in soaking up damage and dishing it back twice as hard. This massive strength is matched with lethal weaponry, with unstoppable counters, fierce on-escape control, and a health pool that seems endless. MASTODONSAURUS dares anything to challenge its dominance. Now, to meet the opposition. The AMPELOREX is a master of the arena. Coming in at 60 feet long, this juggernaut is built for endurance, control, and adaptability. Every move it makes is punishing, and its kit is well equipped for the job, with cleansing, healing, distraction, and a ton of ferocity. And when used right, it doesn't just win fights, it outlasts them. It's got the strength to punish, and it dominates with precision, adaptability, and synergy. That's what earns it a place among the meta's elite. With that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, we can finally head into our first metric, the species profile. As Mastodonsaurus struts into the analysis platform, we're going to be doing a little bit something different today. As you can recall from a previous video we did on Mastodonsaurus, I don't think you guys really care about its genuine base stats when you unlock it. So for that reason, we're going to be going with a boosted build, because if you recall from a previous video, this one looks very, very different. In my previous video where I looked at Mastodonsaurus, it had around 8,000 health and a little bit under 3,000 attack, with the rest into crit. However, now since more time has gone on and we've got more time to research this stuff, we decided that this is actually the best build currently. Because a lot of players have decided to speed boost their Mastodonsaurus for the speed ties and other various matchups that we will get to shortly, the best build, in my opinion, is 7,201 health, 3,162 attack, 129 speed, 50% armor, 5% crit chance, and 125 critical damage. This is mainly due to the fact, like I said, of speed ties, and if you really wanted to, you could lower speed down to around 125 to 127 to put on your health to get around that 7,401 benchmark. However, how does this compare to AMPELOREX? Well, we can take a look at that right now. Taking a look at AMPELOREX now, you can immediately tell the huge difference when it comes to health and damage, with AMPELOREX having around about 2,000 extra health than Masto, and a little bit over 50 attack. It doesn't really make too much of a difference, however the health definitely will make a difference, especially when we get to the moves very shortly. However, the rest of the build is 107 speed, 25% armor, 10% critical chance, and 125 critical damage. Not really much to talk about here, nothing's really changed since the last time I showcased this thing. So overall, it really only takes a huge advantage in overall health. But how does that match when you look at its abilities? Well, that's what we're about to get into in Sector 2. Taking a look at the old Croc's abilities, not much has changed as I suspected from the last time. If anything, Masto has only gotten stronger with the recent introductions. It still does what it does best. It still has Leader Leech, which bypasses almost every single capability your opponent has. It still has Anti-Heal, which does have a couple of niches on its own, such as swapping into a Dragonith that's going for maximum ferocity. I've seen this done a numerous amount of times, and it's actually worked really, really well in the Masto's favor, so that's actually a pretty cool trick you can do should you decide to go for it. Dispersed Fierce Impact ties in really well with medium resilient counterattack. Alert Protecting Wren is probably one of the more weaker moves of this kit. However, when it's threatened, it will work out really, really well if you can get that off. And to top it all off, it has a nice package with the No Escape, which already gives it a huge advantage when you compare it to AMPELOREX's moves. Taking a look at the Sauropod's abilities, again, not much has really changed. I mean, it still has everything that we talked about previously. It's got Dispersed Superior Vulnerability, Taunting Resilient Group Impact, Intimidating Brace, Fierce Devouring Rampage, Medium Ferocious Piercing Counter, Jesus Christ, that's a really long ass name, Swap and Invincibility, Stunning Obstruction. So really the only thing we can take a look at here is that On Escape. Masto's On Escape grants it a good passive ability where you're not going to get punished should they attempt to swap. However, with AMPELOREX, we see time and time again that you have a On Escape like that, it's going to get used against you one way or another, where it's something trying to swap out and get hit but dealing their own counter hit to you, which in turn punishes you harder than you punish them. So in that term, Masto does take the overall edge when it comes to the On Escape. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it takes the edge in overall abilities. You see, AMPELOREX has Intimidating Brace, and that has no delay. So essentially, if you're low and you decide to come back later, you can always use Intimidating Brace, tank the hit, slow your opponent down, and get your own huge hit afterwards, which is a huge advantage when you compare it to Masto, who arguably struggles against Fierce. Not to say that it's terrible against them, it can still do its own ridiculously hard hits, but it suffers a little bit more when you pair that up when it's lower and it decides to come back. That's what's really going to hurt it the most. So in overall stats and abilities, AMPELOREX would take that edge. However, abilities are not all. It's what you can fight against and how well you do against them is what matters in general. So we can take a look at that right now in Section 3, the Combat Viability. It's time to crock and roll. Taking a look at the Amphibians matchups, we see that not much has changed ever since the last time we reviewed it. Obviously, there has been new additions into the game which have contributed to some creatures moving around, and with more time and research spent into Mastodonsaurus, obviously things have dropped and gone higher as well. As you can see, the 100% victory probability section has changed, There are some things that you'll notice that weren't in there the last time, such as the inclusion of Magnoraptor, which is no longer in the 100% range. We'll get to that in a second. The only new addition here really is Oremo. Obviously, Oremo struggles against something that can hit that hard, and the cheat death is not really going to save it in this instance. If we move down to the 75% range, it's still relatively the same with Monolomoth and Cerastegatops, but now we have Protolux and Protondodon here, mainly because they can stall out the fight long enough and do decent enough damage. Heading into the 50% range, we see that AMPELOREX has made its way here, because it is solely move dependent and boost spread dependent as well, so it really can go either way in the combatant's favors. And we have the newly released Dracos Intrepidus that can help in stunning the Masto per se. So the reason why it is here is due to the fact that, one, it has to survive the initial leader leech hit in order for it to do anything, and two, it has to stun the Masto or just something in order to take it out, because if it doesn't stun, then it will most likely die. Moving into the 25% range, we see that things here are a little bit different. Magnoraptor's made its way there because if you actually have a 7,000 plus health Magnoraptor, it will survive most Masto attacks, but it will get itself really, really low. But it's not always the case because there are obviously very speedy Magnoraptors in the arena. Moving on, we got Yutyrannus here. Nothing really much has changed from the last time. Yuta is just a little bit situational because they can always swap out and abuse that on escape you have, which is why a lot of on escapes that do damage should be really, really punishing if you don't want them abused. And then moving down to the absolute lowest, Griganeth and Spinotops have little to no issues fighting Mastodonsaurus. They can handle themselves really well, and while yes, they do get low, they can kill Masto more times than not. And I think it's important to mention this since we are sort of in a battle analysis segment. So Mastodonsaurus does very well even at lower levels in the Nublar Shores versus AMPELOREX. At level 26, you can just plug and play this thing and it'll do you very, very nicely. As we're in AMPELOREX, however, that's where it starts to struggle. It really has a hard time in the shores or just any sort of arena after 5,700 in my opinion, at level 26 to 27. Level 28 is just barely cutting it. Level 29, it is holding its own. Where it holds its best, in my opinion, is when it is at that level 30, and especially if you get that tier 2. So that's why I do think it's important to mention Mastodonsaurus' like higher versatility, where you don't really need to have it at level 30 to do damage. It's gonna fuck shit up even at level 26, which is granted a huge advantage and places it in a comfortable spot in this matchup. However, can the amphibian stand up to the Titanosaur's power? Like Mastodonsaurus, the sauropod itself has some pretty good matchups to its name, if not better. The reason for this is due to its synergy and overall playstyle, which is different from Masto, if that makes sense. As you can see, it does kill Spinotops in the 100% range, all the way from Oremocanus to Conchatosaurus and Tdak. If we move down to the 75% range, we have a little bit of a different score than the last time. Whereas last time we had stuff like Magnoraptor down in the 25% range, now we have it in the 75%, mainly because it will die more often than not. And we also have Trichvenator here because it can still put up some pretty good damage, but it will ultimately find itself dead as well. In the 50% category, I have put Mastodonsaurus, obviously for the same reason I put AMPELOREX down in its own section, and Dracos Intrepidus because it is also stun reliant and it just boost build reliant as well. Moving into the 25% range, I have put Yutyrannus here. Again, it's really just situational on when it comes out and when it's used, but it has the best shot at instantly killing AMPELOREX. And then moving down to the absolute counters range, we have Griganeth. And a little bit of a note as well, yes, Griganeth does kill AMPELOREX. The fact that AMPELOREX is able to take Griganeth down within an inch of its life is a huge achievement in of itself. And that's the reason why a lot of people are now going for a 10,081 build on their Griganeth just to survive the max attack tier 2 AMPELOREX crit, which will do around like 10,020 damage. So people this is obviously affecting people in some way. So AMPELOREX is really putting its own mark into the meta, as well as landing itself a very comfortable place in this face-off with some pretty decent advantages. This battle will be neck and neck. The computer models are complete. The two combatants are almost ready to go at it in the arena. But before we initialize this face-off, let's quickly recap what they bring to the fight. We've talked about these creatures' strengths pretty heavily in this video, but now let's move on to some potential weaknesses. And that's kind of the hard part about this segment, is that we gotta talk about the harsh reality that there aren't many, if any, weaknesses for these two. Let me explain, very briefly. So AMPELOREX and Masto are both very high contenders in this meta, and currently they have little to no counters, only sharing one common counter, that being Graganeth, able to kill them both pretty quickly. However, it's where MASTODONSAURUS lies in the fact that it does struggle a little bit more when it comes to fierce creatures, and it does have a harder time returning into a match after it gets hurt. It is very much a kill on sight creature. Every time it's out on the field, it will get a kill no matter what. However, that is not the case with AMPELOREX. Unlike Masto, AMPELOREX fits much more into the team synergist role, where it can keep coming back and rely on its teammates to back it up whenever, and it can get it into a comfortable position in order to use that intimidating brace, heal, stall, get your health back up, and slowly continue on the fight. Whereas Masto does struggle in that area. These creatures should not be disrespected whatsoever and hold a very high standard in the meta, and unless something drastic happens, these two will be here to stay. And that's what makes this matchup very fun. They are almost the same creature in terms of strengths, weaknesses, and overall builds. This match will be extremely close, and every single factor will be taken into consideration when we decide what creature will come out on top, and it may be because of one singular component. Can the sauropod's bulk match the reptile's power? We are now ready to unleash these two monsters into the battle arena. The Triassic Temnos Fondel brings to the fight greater viability at lower levels and a more reliable on-escape. The Titanic Sauropod AMPELOREX brings to the fight greater consistency, overall better durability, and stronger healing. Both combatants come at an equilibrium when it comes to sheer bulk and higher output. With all of the data gathered into the computers and our research team at a conclusion, we have now got ourselves a winner. The winner of this face-off, the AMPELOREX. Now, why did the AMPELOREX win in this scenario? Although MASTODONSAURUS just managed to squeak out more advantages than it, the factors that contributed heavily to AMPELOREX's victory was its survivability, but more importantly, its consistency. Let me explain. Now, while MASTODONSAURUS does do very good damage, like I said previously, it is very much an on-site creature. It relies more on getting the quick kills before it can get taken advantage of. AMPELOREX does not have that issue. Whereas MASTODONSAURUS does have a little bit more trouble against fierce, AMPELOREX can actually do much more damage to them than they can do to it. Taking Graganeth down to just a sliver of HP and forcing half of the player base in the Nublar Shores to buff their Graganeth to 10,000 plus health is a huge achievement in and of itself, because that just shows how scary AMPELOREX has really become. Pair that up with the fact that it can repeatedly keep coming back into matches even when it's lower or at a disadvantage is just very big. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why AMPELOREX managed to secure today's victory on this showdown. This was a very close fight, with both combatants being super close in all combat categories. However, while the meta may be in shambles at the moment and players are ragging on for a nerf for one or both combatants, none of which have garnered more hate than the next creature we're going to talk about.